Welcome to the 0400 podcast, the podcast for dreamers. Today is April 8th, 2022. It is 4 a.m. We're here in Nashville, Tennessee. Pleasure to see you, boys. Welcome.
You too, man.
Welcome back.
Good morning.
The week after the great Lost episode.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry for you. For those of you who have been following us, and we've been gone for a few weeks. It's because we recorded an episode, and we lost it. So here we are.
Audio did not record.
Now we're not going to try to recreate it or anything like that for you. So
No.
It was lost.
But hey,
We're gonna
you
start
live
fresh.
and you learn, and now we know that there is an issue within our system, and now we have redundancy. So never again will we lose
Never
audio.
again.
Never.
It was
ever.
the best episode ever.
Yeah.
I believe it.
It was really good.
It really was.
Well, welcome you guys. Good to see you. What are we drinking today, Jake? Besides, I know it's coffee, but what kind?
It's a mixture of a few different things, actually. I've been running low, so I just took a few of them
It's
and
a
put them
mutt.
together. So it's a Hanes special blend. It's actually stuff that we had
Disgusting.
last week.
I feel like that was a brand Michael Jordan endorsed.
Hanes special.
It's actually pretty good.
They're special if Michael Jordan's wearing them.
True.
Delicious. Yeah.
Yeah.
This reminds me, my mom, growing up, she was a little mischievous sometimes, and we would have dinner. That was one thing I really appreciated about how my parents did business, was we would always have dinner together no matter what. If we could, unless somebody was missing for some reason. And it would be like a hot dinner. And one night, my dad was at work, and so my mom was just throwing something together. And she goes, "All right, kids, tonight we're going to do something new." "Yeah, what is it?" "We're having Muscos." And I'm like, "Whoa, Muscos." And I grew up in Ohio, the Midwest, so there's all sorts of like casserole dishes up there that anyone up there, shout out to you. You'll know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what a Musco is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Muscos, this is awesome. It sounds like cool, like a corn dog or something. And then we get to dinner, and it was just a bunch of Tupperware pulled out of the fridge with the lids off. And it's like, everything must go.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
The rage that grew up inside of me at that moment.
And that was the moment Brent became who he is.
Probably. Yeah. Well, cool, you guys. Any other announcements?
Just continue to rate the podcast, please, wherever you're listening. Follow us on Instagram. We're on TikTok as well. And besides that, we got a cool event coming up.
Let's. I know we had talked about that, but we are doing an adventure for Valley Heart Adventure Company. It's our spring adventure, and it is with the little teaser that I'd given about it is a trip where we're going to be descending into the underworld. And everything that entails. And so if you're interested or intrigued by that and want to learn a little bit more information and see if it's something that you want to apply for or participate in, just go to valleyheartadventurecompany.com, and there's a link on there that you can click and submit us some information. So,
It's going to be awesome.
If you want to come with us.
It'll be a Memorial Day weekend, Friday through Sunday.
Memorial Day weekend, that's right. All right, y'all. Well, I've got 5 minutes share today, so what I wanted to do was share a poem with you guys. It's a poem that's been a bastion of sanity for me, to be honest, over the last few years. I'm going to move this up. I feel like I'm slouching. Been a bastion of sanity for me over the last few years, especially doing psychotherapy, as Spencer, as you understand. It's really rewarding work, and also it's really, really important to stay anchored and stay present, because you will go, it's like bucking bronchos. You will go, people will take you for a ride, you know what I mean, if you're not careful. And so this is one of those poems that anchors me. So I just wanted to share it with y'all. I did not write this poem. It's a poem by a person named Oriah Mountain Dreamer. And so there you go. So podcast for dreamers sounds fitting. So y'all interested in hearing this poem?
Oh yeah,
Oh, for sure.
Come on.
All right. Kind of feel like wish there was a way you could play some cool music. Maybe we can put that in the background.
Yeah.
Some cool like vibed out music.
Just
Maybe not like that. I was thinking like cool ambient music with like jungle sounds in the background or something. All right. Anyway. Okay. So this is called The Invitation by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals, or have become shriveled and closed for fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it, or fade it, or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own. If you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, to be realistic, to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. If you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. If you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty, even when it is not pretty every day. And if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company that you keep in the empty moments. How did that land on you?
I think it embodies being a dreamer so accurately. I think that being a dreamer means you're innately curious. I think we're all curious with people because as you become a dreamer and understanding yourself more and you begin to explore just humanity, people become so much more interesting. And I feel that because I'm an introvert, but I've been more extroverted than ever because I've just been truly curious with the people that I've been meeting. And I feel that of what they're saying. It's like, I don't care about the money you make or I ask you what you do, but I really don't care. Like, I just want to know what makes you, what makes you tick.
Mm-hmm.
And do we have something here, like a common thread with all of us? We've seen it, and with most people, if they got the sauce, so to speak, of being a dreamer, pretty quickly. You can tell. Again, it's like it embodies so much of who you are. I find I think a lot of people will look at like celebrities and people who are millionaires and have such high esteem for them. And when they're around, they're like so excited to be around this great person. I feel that way about dreamers when I get to know dreamers. You know, it's like I want to just like pick their brain. I'm excited. It's like I forget the small talk. There's so many dumb questions we ask when we first meet someone. Like, well, what do you do? I've reframed that. I've learned this from the Minimalist podcast. They ask, what are you passionate about? So much better. You could get to the same place, but the question is so much more open-ended.
I'm passionate about what I do. Gotcha. Yeah, man. That's right. You know, when I hear this poem, it orients me, I think, in a true way. It orients me to what's important. Because we hear lots of stories, and we've talked a lot about the concept and the metaphor of story and how important that is. And in psychotherapy, which is what I do for a living, and also what I'm passionate about, one of the things anyway, I hear lots of stories. But what I love about the poem is the poem reveals the truest story to me. And that's the story of character. Character is story. Not only is there a character in the story, but there's character within that character, in the other sense of the word. Character is story. And so, to me, that's the most compelling thing. I don't care where you're coming from, honestly. I don't care. I mean, obviously, I do care about your story and how it impacts you. But what I mean is, what I care about more is who you are. And when the pressure comes, what you do. I'm interested in your character. That's your story. And to me, that's what the poem really speaks to, is a lot of people have a nice song and dance, and it's something they've learned how to do, probably a long time ago, in order to fit in or belong or something like that. And that can be the very trapping, the thing that they cling to, you know? The ways in which we get praise can be the things that we begin to identify ourselves by. And there's just a power that comes with just treating every human being from this perspective of character.
You go so much deeper when you have so much. When you have like an intentionality behind getting to know the heart of a person. It's like now I'm getting into these conversations just based off of curiosity and care for another human about like trauma, you know, like multiple times over the past few weeks, I've gotten to know someone on the surface level. And then within a few conversations, we get into like the heart of what has made them who they are, you know, and like trauma. And it's, if you just show a little bit of care and have a little bit of audacity, like you would be surprised how refreshing it is for people to have like a vessel of like, no one asked me this, you know, or I haven't thought of that before. And it's not that I'm trying to be a mentor or guide, and you probably shouldn't be that for everybody. But you're just innately curious and you have a care for people. It just kind of expresses itself.
Yeah.
It's one thing that I heard recently, just talking about what do you do, that question. I heard a story of this person who was sitting down at a dinner. I think it was at the White House. I don't remember. It was a while back. But they were sitting next to a Supreme Court justice. And, of course, this person is wanting to, like, get to know the Supreme Court justice. Like, oh, my goodness, you're a Supreme Court justice. One of the coolest jobs ever. But the justice turned to this person and said, so what do you love about what you do?
Mm. Yeah,
and
that's good.
he immediately, the question was reframed that it's not about exactly what it is you do on a day-to-day basis. It's what makes you alive within what you do. And that's how you get to know someone, you know, because there are a ton of people that are stuck in jobs that they don't really love, but they can probably find something they love about it, even if it's just, well, it allows me to put food on the table. You know, it allows me to learn something, like learn a new skill. It allows me to whatever it is. Or you get those people that are dreamers and they're like, well, it makes me feel alive. It makes me feel myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a powerful question to ask. And I think you're also, that poem to me also speaks, as you said, to character and to both the characters in the story and also the character of the character, the integrity of, and I mean integrity also like the integrity of the ship, you know, like if a ship has integrity, it means it's going to float, and it requires being battle tested in a sense. There's something about standing in the fire and not shrinking back.
Love that line.
Oh yeah, man. That
if you want to be in my inner circle, you better be able to stand in that fire and not shrink back. And I'll do the same for you.
It's so crucial to have that sort of strength and also humility to ask for help when you need it. You know, stand in the fire with me because this is getting really tough. It's getting really hot, right? Yeah. I think that's what's so cool about psychotherapy is that your job is to stand in the fire with people and be there like with a hand on their back being like, it's okay, I know it's hurting, but let's stay here. Let's figure out what's happening. Let's let this chaff, let's let all the externalities burn away so we get to the core of this thing.
The baptism by fire, the true self does not get burned. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The true self doesn't get burned when you're in the presence of your God. Everything else does. And the more painful it is, it means the harder you're holding on to it.
Right.
Just let it go, baby. It's like holding on to a hot coal.
Mm.
Just let that thing go, and then you'll stop getting burned.
So here's a question. When you guys were growing up, and I knew I was a dreamer, didn't know how to express it, but I knew I was a dreamer. Did you feel like an outcast at times? Especially being like a male. I grew up in a household of being the youngest of two brothers, so I already felt like an outcast to some extent, right? With just being the younger brother. But I think that with being a dreamer, it made me passionate. I was also sensitive. Things I was ashamed of, now I realize were my strengths. And actually, part of that has been a redemption arc over the past few years of getting back to sensitivity and fully integrating that. Because I think after a while, I became brooding because I thought that that's what I needed to be. You know, that's how it would be accepting. But all that to say, yeah, did you feel outcast in a way, or did you feel ostracized? Did you feel just unique? Like when you were growing up, especially as, you know, again, being a male, and I think with being a dreamer holds some qualities of feminine characteristics of what some would consider. How did that play into your childhood?
I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's a feminine characteristic because you have those warrior poets, you know, maybe sensitivity, but yeah, I was very sensitive. My feelings got hurt very easily, you know, and I was bullied a lot as a kid for that. And also for being a little chunky, but it was mainly, I was just like, I took it, you know, I would just take it because I was so concerned with the relationship remaining intact with everyone I was with, you know? And so I think I grew into my dreamingness, if that makes sense, my dreamerness. I didn't realize that's what I was. I thought I was just a human in that sense. Like from a very young age, I was really interested in story and books and music, and I wanted to be a musician when I got older and all these sorts of things, but I thought that was normal. And I think by the time I got to high school, I was so wrapped up in externalities and being popular that it wasn't really till I moved to Nashville that I began to do the work to realize that's what I was doing, was dreaming, you know? But now it's such a part of who I am that I can't escape it. You know, as things change in my life, and it's one of the things I love most about my personality as well, is the fact that I'm always dreaming and casting visions. And as things change, I always tell Sydney, my wife, I'm like, please don't ever let me stop dreaming. You know, please don't ever let me stop dreaming. And she's like,
you've tasked her.
Yes. And she's taken that upon herself, and she said, it's one of the things I love most about you. Because there's always this like I'm just looking out at the future, right? At what could be, and working towards that thing rather than letting the things happen to me, Like I don't want to be molded by the modern world. I want to mold the world around me. I think that's part of being a dreamer, is tasking yourself with creation, being a co-creator in that. I think that's an important thing that we take into account, is that there's two types of people. There are the people that let the things happen to them, and or let the world happen to them, and there are people that happen to the world.
Come
and
on,
so
dude.
I want to be the latter. And I think I think maybe that's what at least is partly at the core of being a dreamer.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. As I think back to my childhood, to answer your question, Jake, I'm not sure how to answer that, so I'm just going to go for it. I think my entire life I have felt like an outsider. As Jimmy Stewart famously said, the whole world's a tuxedo and I'm a pair of brown shoes. And I love that. That's a deep cut, Jimmy Stewart. My whole life I have felt like an outsider. However, there was a sense of belong. Like I didn't care. I didn't care up until about 5th grade. And that's when all of a sudden I cared about not being like the other kids in some way. All of a sudden now I realize, oh, this is a competition. This is like real. This is painful if I don't fit in somehow. And that's where it all went to shit. And that's also where I began to craft my counterfeit dream, which was a way to feel like I belonged again, or feel unique or special or cool. Those are all things I already was, that I just fully embodied. When I was in 4th grade, I didn't care what people thought of me. I was free. I was a dork. I wore sweatpants to school and neon shirts, and I'd create videos and be silly, and I was totally spontaneous. And that's who I am, and that's the person that I've been calling forth in all of my healing journey as a man now, that hopefully I'm embodying more and more today. Just shedding that old stuff based on the lie. So yeah, I've always felt like an outsider, but I don't mean that in a dramatic way, or like a sad way. I just didn't care before. I embraced it. And then somewhere along the line, 5th grade for me, it shifted into like a painful experience and a shameful experience of being an outsider. And then I've been working my way back ever since to redeem that ability to not really care. And that's not like nihilism, because it's actually, there's something I care about way more. Like Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F Word. It's a great title, it's a great title for a book. It's very compelling. And it's a trick too, because the title sounds really cynical, but the whole book is about how to know what you really care about, and then just forget about the rest. So that's how I'd answer that question. Is I've always been a dreamer, but I have 2 different experiences of that. On the first experience of being a dreamer, it was just embodying total spontaneity and presence. And then that shifted into like this ambition based on a way to kind of get back into that feeling of just being at home wherever I am. Because that's what the true outsider, the true nomad, the true mystic, in my view, is home wherever they are. And I think that's something that I try to embody.
I'd say that's closer to my experience of how I felt too. Again, not to be melodramatic either. It's just it felt so disjointed, you know? And I knew that deep down that it would pay off. But there's ways that I coped to be just more normal, you know? More of like just along the path with everyone else. But yeah. Thank you.
There's this type of character in literature, and mainly I think in like Russian literature, I think is where it's most found. But you see this archetype all over the place of the holy fool. And like the most recent example I've seen of this is in Loris, the book I've talked about in here a couple times, where the main character moves to this town and he's so in touch with the divine that everything else falls away. Nothing else matters. And there are multiple holy fools within this town. They're all like little hermits. Loris, at the time, he has a different name. His name changes multiple times. I can't remember right now, but he is Arseny. Arseny is his name. He is living in the graveyard of a monastery, just in this little hut. And he will go into town, and there's this other holy fool that is just the most insane person ever, and will stand on the street corner and throw rocks at a house, right? And everyone's looking at this person like, what is this person doing? And he's like, you fools, I'm throwing rocks at the demons outside this house. Can you not see? You know? And I think that's a great example of someone who did not care because they cared about something more. There's something that was more transcendent and more divine about them that allowed them to see things that other people couldn't see. And these characters were so strange to the rest of the world. They were outsiders by choice because they knew there was something else that demanded their attention and their affection more than fitting in with the world. Maybe that's part of also being a dreamer as well, is the ability, I think the poem said this, to be able to look like a fool for love, for your dreams. These guys were literally fools.
Yeah.
But were they? Were they in touch with something different and higher than what everyone else was touching? And is everybody in that town, if they were to surrender to that higher thing, are they able to see the same thing the fool sees? Is the capacity there, but they just haven't made the steps to see it? I think that's closer to reality. I think it's closer to the reality that I believe that every person's a dreamer. Every person is a dreamer, yet not everyone has cultivated the eyes to see what is there but isn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's why it's called the invitation.
Yeah.
Everyone's a dreamer, but whether or not you flip that switch or manifest it for yourself, embrace that journey, of course, is up to you.
And the reason why I bring that up is because I know for me, again, I was raised in the South by a Southern family and, again, 2 older brothers. And, again, I felt like it was so disjointed where I went from being, like you said, free to caring and then wanting to fit in. And it felt disjointed from what I considered then masculinity. Now I consider, I guess you could say, alphaness, or like the bastardized views of what it means to be a man, at least in the South, you know?
A gentleman?
Yeah. And because again, I think the title I put myself in pre-dreamer was hopeless romantic is the only other title I had. A sensitive as a hopeless romantic. And there's like so many interesting things that I like to do, but it wasn't like, not all of it was considered manly. Like, yes, I worked on cars with my dad. He worked on hot rods on the side. Yeah. You know, I enjoyed being outside and hunting and all that as well. But there's also things I really enjoyed too that were much more sensitive. And again, I think part of maybe my trauma in why it was hard for me is just trying to consolidate that with, you know, brothers, and being sensitive became a point of negativity. Like, oh, you're just being sensitive, you're being crybaby, whatever, right? That's where it kind of starts.
Yeah.
But I realized with what you're saying here about, being audaciously yourself, or caring so little about what other people think so that you can care more about stepping into who you truly are. I just totally lost my train of thought mid.
You're talking about what it means to be a man in the South and the way you were raised, and you have a sensitivity to you.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's a professional.
Yes, as a therapist, bring it back around.
I'm really good at tracking.
Yeah,
because it happens all the time.
But that is the most, I think, masculine thing you can do. Manly thing is someone who lives audaciously as themselves. Because when you meet that person who's free, no matter, again, what money they make or anything like that, the status they have, when you meet someone who's just truly free, that is like a true man, That's true confidence. That's not arrogance. That's not alphaness. There's no compensatory things that person has to do for them to be impressed, for them to impress you. That's not even on the radar,
I always bring up literature, I'm sorry, but I think of Achilles in the Iliad. So I could view Achilles as being sort of this bastardized, as I like that term, view of masculinity, in which you have the strongest character in the army, the strong warrior. He's a demigod, and he is consumed by rage. The story of the Iliad is a story of rage. It really is. And Achilles is so consumed by his rage and his capacity for violence that he is unable to see anything else for what it is. And so I think this goes into sort of this idea that's coming out now out of Carl Jung and out of Joseph Campbell and stuff, that to harness your shadow is to have the capacity for that rage against something that's unjust or unfair or that is disordered, but also be able to not bottle it up, but wrap it up and be able to use it when necessary.
Yeah.
So Achilles for me was sort of that character that part of me is like, yes, he can go slaughter like 10,000 enemy troops whenever he wants, And the other part of me is like, but he wasn't free.
Yeah.
He was a slave to his rage. And tens of thousands of people paid for that with their blood. And to have that passion, because it came out of this sensitivity and this love for this person, right, that was murdered. It came out of that like sensitivity and love and romanticness, but it was unbridled. It was unharnessed, and he could never control it. I would start to view masculinity as having that capacity, but also having discipline on when to use it.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is an important conversation today in our culture. There's a lot of conversation about separating sex and gender and all of that, of course. It's all out there. I mean, that conversation's everywhere. So we're all males, but are we all men? And what does that mean to be a man? And I think that's a it's a bastion, it's a fortress, it's something that needs to be defended today more than ever. Not with politics, not with ideology, but with a grounded and true sense and embodiment of what does it mean? What is masculinity? What does that mean? And how do we embody that today, especially in our culture, where we're being branded left and right, as far back as I can remember, as this idea of toxic masculinity, and so I think it's important for us to remind ourselves and also declare into the world, just here at this table, and let it emanate from here. Again, not proclaiming to know, to have and behold all of the truth about this, but really just claiming to lean in and trying to embody and just noticing what's what's working and what's not working here. And so, what does it mean to be a man? And yeah, I like what you've said about, and we've kind of talked a little bit around this idea of embodying a strength, but having a romance behind it, like a purpose to it, like a sweetness or a sensitivity or an innocence blended within it, which is, I think, wisdom. I think that's what wisdom is. You know, wisdom without strength isn't wisdom. It's just an idea. And so that innocence and strength together, I think, can create a lot of wisdom. And yeah, what does it mean to be a man? And you talked about, Jake, like growing up in the South. There was kind of probably some. I didn't grow up in the South, so there's probably some archetypes there or some models in that culture and what it means to be a man. I kind of jokingly said like a gentleman, you know, because the Southern gentleman, you know, is a thing. At least growing up in Ohio, you know. I thought it was so funny when I moved down here. Everyone's like calling like where I'm from the North. I'm like, we never said that up there. But yeah, but didn't you call us the South? I'm like, yeah, but that everybody does. Like the South is their own thing, you know, but it's not that way. But yeah, what does it mean to be a man? What models are you trying to emulate? I think that's a very important question. Arcing back to the work of John Eldredge, there was a men's movement. If well, anyway, there was a men's movement in the 90s in America. Promise Keepers, a Christian men's movement, really. But then it also expanded out. That's when Iron John was written, which is a book about men, and that's where a lot of Fire in the Belly is another great book that was written back then. And so this idea of what does it mean to be a man and how can we embody these characteristics? And in the 90s, for a period of time, people were even in secular culture were having this conversation. And so I would like to see if we can reboot that to some degree with what we're doing. This isn't like a men's podcast or anything like that, but we are men. So, you know, I think it's important for us to speak into that void which exists in our culture today.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing because I was asking the question probably internally to myself of like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be manly in those times? And I would make the example that it's like asking or Google searching, I want to lose belly fat. How do I lose belly fat? And then someone tells you that you need to do crunches. If you know anything about body composition and fat distribution, you realize that that's the wrong answer to the wrong question. And I think the same can be true of like, how do I be alpha? How do I be a man? All that you're going to get there is the wrong answers to the wrong questions for most people out there. It's not, again, embodying particular character traits, overconfidence, pride, manly things like working on cars or being outdoors.
Oh yeah, working on cars,
Yeah. It's all about, again, I think a man is full of integrity and tries to pursue being complete. And let's separate that from the Christian viewers. You know, I know people will be like, you know, well, you can't be complete without Christ, 100%. But I'm saying complete as in what I see in the complete man is one who strives for being down for whatever situation. Like you said, like being battle tested. That's the complete man. Someone who stands up for something, has integrity, and is constantly ready at any point to do whatever it takes, you know? Like just a person that challenge hits them in the face and they go, cool, let's figure it out. Like that I think that is what it embodies, it means to be like a true man and a dreamer.
Yeah.
I think you're on the right track there, because once again, like when we're asking the question, who are you? We did in our workbook, it's very easy to just list adjectives.
What you are.
Yeah. And so we may have this idea like, well, a man is blah, a man is strong, a man is confident, a man is whatever it is. but I think it's more so tailored to the individual, but also there are traits that a man embodies. And I think one of the things that has been very powerful about jiu-jitsu for me is being battle tested every day. There's this idea in the modern world that we should be making ourselves more comfortable. And I think the new counterculture, well, first off, we're seeing that anyone that has eyes to see and ears to hear can look around at our culture and see that whatever meta we're working on is failing.
It's obvious.
It's obvious. Our culture, our civilization is crumbling at its core. And there's an orchestrated attack on true masculinity. It's orchestrated and it's clear. It's obvious. I'm sorry I get passionate about it, but it's very clear. But there's this idea that we should be comfortable, that we should be complacent, that we should sit on our couch, that we should, go to work, come home, and here we are. We're at the end of the day, we're just kind of going to veg out and binge. I don't know when binging became a positive thing, but now it's I binged that whole show and I was like, good for you. There's another one out next week. You got to binge as well. Perfect. Yeah. We are not built for comfort. We are not built for comfort. We are not made for it. We were made to be great. We were made for greatness. And we were made to embody the values that order the world. And we need to, as men, take up that mantle again. And part of jiu-jitsu for me, going back to that, is when I go in there, when I started, the first class I went to, a 105-pound girl took my back and choked me out. I had, in that moment, to face the fact that I am not as competent as I thought I was. Right? But that didn't make me shrink away from becoming competent. That put the fire in me to become competent. And now, 3 years after that, I feel very confident that if push comes to shove, like you were talking about, when the challenge comes to the door, that I could handle myself for the sake of my family, for the sake of the people I care about. But that starts with embracing and choosing your suffering, because it's not comfortable. Jiu-jitsu can be very uncomfortable. It's painful. It's humbling. The ego takes a hit every single day, right? There are people at the gym that still just stomp me every single time I roll them, But that doesn't matter, because I'm still doing what I need to do to become competent, and I'm chasing those values I think it can provide.
Because you competing against that person isn't so much about you winning or losing; it's about you winning against the person who you were yesterday.
Exactly. I'm competing against myself. Mm-hmm. Spencer now would absolutely just wreck Spencer a year ago, and it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. Like, I'm not saying it has to be jiu-jitsu. I think it's a very powerful tool and mechanism, but there needs to be something in your life that challenges you, that's on the verge of breaking you, that you learn to overcome.
What's calling you to the edge?
Yes.
And what is your edge? Because the edge is where all the life is. And as my mentor used to tell me, Brent, if you want to live on the edge, on the cutting edge, get ready to bleed. If you want to live on the cutting edge, get ready to bleed. But the edge is the most dangerous place you can be. It's the riskiest place you can be. And it's where the adventurist lives. There's no other place we live. And it's where all the things come alive. It's where you come across, or you come against, the veil between this world and the other. Yeah, I love that, man. And what does it mean to embody that ability, that stamina to be uncomfortable? I think one thing that I think we would all agree upon is that to be a man, to be counted among men, you have to cultivate a certain amount of strength and stamina. And there's different ways to be strong. And this doesn't mean that we can't also be sensitive. Every single man at this table is a very sensitive soul. We've all shared that in different ways. And so I'm here just to proclaim, if you're a man and you're sensitive, good. You need that. That's a sixth gear. You got like another gear other people don't have, if you can embody that and bridle that. and harness it and transmute it into some kind of pure strength. I think a man needs to be ready to die, meaning needs to be ready to know who and what he will lay his life down for. I think that's unique to masculinity. And having a little baby now more than ever, I know I'm experiencing that call, that burden. Hopefully, I never have to be in a situation like that. But I also hope in the same breath, if I ever am in a situation like that, there will be no hesitation. It's me. I think that's a man.
I think part of what I was mentioning about integrity and embodying integrity as, a free soul, as a man, integrity requires boundaries. And as a man, as a dreamer, and as someone who's intentional, it's weird. It's like you kind of hold these two opposites together. One of which is on one spectrum, it's when any of us are engaging with someone, it's like fully present, intentional, care about the other person. But on the opposite end, you also have to hold being slightly aloof, and not in a way that's like pushing people away, but when you have to prioritize what you value and have integrity, you then have to create boundaries for your time, your efforts. You only have so much time, and we are all running on fumes at the moment in this current season. And it's entirely necessary as a person, as a man especially, that if you prioritize something, you have to also say, I can't do this right now, or I can't get lunch dates or do lunch dates with friends. I can't do this thing that I want to do. You have to create boundaries. Even if you want to engage with that person or you want to do this thing, you then have to prioritize what really matters.
Boundaries, we're talking about walls, man. Like the Watchmen on the wall, like you're protecting
In the North,
the Northmen. You're protecting.
I missed that reference.
You're fine, dude.
Game of Thrones, baby.
Okay.
Get with it, Jake. That's already old.
No thanks.
Just kidding.
But the Watchmen on the wall, like to be able to enforce boundaries is to be strong, is to be protective. And at the end of the day, like we have the people that are within our walls, right? And we have to be judicious about who we let in and who gets our energy and our time, because we only have a limited amount of it. So I think you're right. I think you're right about that. I think that's part of the strength. And I think, with the enforcement of boundaries, and I'm not talking about like, let's go back now a little bit to kind of the potential of violence within men. Because I think when we're talking about toxic masculinity, there's the potential of violence is not violence, But I think people see in the modern world where everything feels cushy and everything feels like we forget that we live on planet Earth. Like we forget that suffering is coming and that it hits all of us. We forget that when we get in a car, we're hurtling down the interstate at 70 miles per hour in a metal tube.
Metal death machine.
Yeah, and like we're hamburger, we're hamburger. And we're more, but you know what I'm saying, like our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so we live in this world where everything's like, okay, we're so insulated to pain, yet we're more depressed and more anxious and than ever, and our civilization's crumbling. And so there's this idea that because men have the potential more so of mayhem, that in itself is a what's the word I'm looking for? Like the potential of it is a mark against masculinity. When I think a truly masculine person, a man, that is a part of who they are, and it's good.
Yeah,
it's good that
it's not a negative quality.
It's not a negative quality. The potential of violence is a good quality, especially when it is bridled and used in the context it's meant to be. I think about the guys that I got down this rabbit hole the last couple of weeks of watching clips from like Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan. And watching these 18, 19-year-old kids who were willing to go get mowed down by machine gun fire because they thought there was something that was more important than them, that their lives were worth giving for a cause. And you look back on World War II, and it was very clear that the cause was valorous. It was courageous. And they left their families, they left their homes to go to foreign soil, knowing that many of them would not come back. 75 million people, I think, is the estimate, died during World War II. It was like 5% of the world's population died during this war. Many of them were men from countries that weren't even really involved in the war, you know? And I think that potential of sacrifice, self-sacrifice, and strength and violence is actually what makes masculinity great. What's toxic is when the person that has the potential for violence doesn't do the work and begins to rage out against the people around them with no good reason.
Passive aggression is still aggression.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. And, you know, pick your poison. Choose your suffering, because it's coming either way. And at the end of the day, I guess, you know, if history is going to judge us, it's going to judge us in how we suffered and like meaning like what form of suffering, and then how we suffered, meaning did we do it well? No matter what hand we're dealt. And we're all dealt a hand, aren't we? To different degrees. My best friend right now is just had a third open heart surgery. He is a man, this guy. And he's suffering. And his character is being revealed. And it is glorious to see who this man is. And the suffering is the mechanism that's bringing it out. He's facing his death. And everything that's there to lean on, all those adjectives are all hilariously gone. You know what I mean? Like they're hilarious that we lean on those things when you're in the context that's so serious as this. So he's fighting for his life right now. And so we're doing what we can to be in the fire with him in that, which is, of course, what compassion means. Choose your suffering and choose wisely. If you don't discipline yourself, the world is going to punish you. Just like being a kid. Discipline has been always one of those words for me that was uncomfortable. It was like a bad word because I was sort of a mischievous, ornery kid. A great deal of my childhood, which means I got into a lot of trouble. Which means I got disciplined a lot. Which growing up in my family, that meant I got spanked. Or when that stopped working, I would be grounded. Or maybe they'd take away something like that I really liked. Some sort of punishment. Discipline equaled punishment at that time. So when I became an adult, not a man, when I became an adult, discipline was punishment. And so self-discipline was, no thanks. Why would I want to punish myself? Discipline's not punishment. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. When God disciplined, like a loving father disciplines his son, which means he instructs him. He instructs him. He inflicts pain in order to teach a lesson. And that's not punishment. It's the opposite of punishment. And so as children, if we don't abide by or embody the values in the house, we get disciplined in order to correct us. As adults, we don't have parents disciplining us anymore. And so as a man, if you don't discipline yourself, this is called self-discipline, then that parental authority is going to punish you. Some people call it karma. Some people call it justice. Some people call it, I don't know. People call it all kinds of things. But if you don't discipline yourself, life's going to punish you. And I think that's a big part about being a man is there is no avoiding conflict. That is a lie. It's a lie that we can avoid conflict. Conflict is everywhere, and it's not wrong. It's in fact the thing. It's the mechanism of the edge. Conflict. It reveals character. There's no such thing as avoiding conflict. It happens all the time. I'm not a very confrontational person. I kind of avoid conflict. What a person, I can relate, what a person is that's saying that is saying is, I'm not comfortable with it. Okay. I think it would be, if you were comfortable with confrontation and conflict, I think that would be a little bit more disconcerting. Of course it's not comfortable, but it's necessary. And so conflict is inevitable, so choose it. And in my view, that's what a man does, is a man pays attention, keeps his eyes open, the watchman on the wall and all that. And there is a seriousness, a deep seriousness. There is like a secret life in the inner parts of a man. Not secret as in bad or hiding or anything like that. That's a boy that does that. That's fear of getting punished. That's in fear of getting punished. But what a man does is keeps his eyes open and chooses that. He is prepared. So
Mel Gibson, The Patriot, man.
Right.
The chest that contained his potential to deal with conflict, that he keeps there whenever he needs it.
Yeah.
And he insulates his children and his wife from that monster until it's necessary for the monster to come out.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, when I was talking about violence, I'm not talking just about physical violence. I was talking about that. I was talking about, because like a 90-year-old man is no longer capable of the same amount of violence as like a 22-year-old man. Physical violence. But that doesn't mean there's not the inner strength to face the conflict when it comes to the door,
Right.
Chaos, man. Life's full of it. It's going to happen.
And if I can jump on that in this topic of masculinity, I read a book called The Way of the Superior Man by David Dida. And this book is not on our reading list because I think it's a valuable read, but I don't agree with everything that he says in the book. But I think it's worth reading as a man just to see. He talks a lot about the polarity between masculine and feminine. And he talks about it and goes into more of like a sexual dynamic between the masculine and the feminine. And anyway, one thing that I pulled from the book that I really liked was he looked at it like he used the metaphor of, chaos and order, yin yang, land, ocean. And he basically made the point in that book that, and disclaimer, there's this is potentially graphic or sexual in nature. There's an underlying metaphor here. Just so you know. So if you have little kids listening, I don't know if there's little kids listening to this podcast, probably not.
I hope not.
Hey, little kids. He believes that
The podcast with dweemers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The way that a man encounters the world needs to match the way that a man pursues a woman. Meaning, think about those old explorers that got into those ships and rowed out over the ocean to the edge of the world. What a man does in that situation, the ocean represents chaos. Always. And so what a man does is he penetrates the chaos. Not to control it, but to explore it. That's what a man does. And a man is learned how to be strong enough to keep the ship afloat, so to speak, and keep it from mutiny and all that. You can play out the metaphor. But the way that the way that the explorer penetrates the ocean, not to control it, because that's insane, to try to control the ocean, to control chaos, that's tyranny. That's insanity. But he penetrates it in order to explore it, to get to know it, to understand it, to have it call him on this adventure. And so the way that the explorer penetrates the chaos of the ocean, that's what he makes the reference of, and this is the sexual part, how a man explores the chaos of the woman and is able to penetrate, not to control, but to explore and to know and to understand. And so I think that's an important part of the conversation is men are drawn to chaos. Or as one of my favorite movies starts this way, I think it's either Lone Survivor or Act of Valor. You know, I'm obsessed with Navy SEALs. But the movie starts with, there's a storm inside us. And every man I've ever met, whether they know it or not, has that storm. And so we're called to it, not to control it, but to explore it.
So if we were to talk to the person maybe 5-10 years ago who doesn't know how to consolidate who they are as a man into being a dreamer or to embody manly qualities, whatever that might mean, what advice would you give? 'Cause I'm sure there's plenty of people listening, whether in their 30s, 20s, teens, whatever age, that someone doesn't know how to consolidate all of that. You're not really sure where to begin. What would you say? What would you give advice to yourself 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
Find a hero. I think that's it. I think that's the model. Find a hero. If you're inspired by somebody, you're going to begin to emulate them. So find a hero. And think about this, y'all. I mean, in our pop culture, let's say, of America today, because I know we know great men in our life that nobody else knows, but in mass media or pop culture today, who's out there that is embodying this heroic sense of masculinity in regards to anywhere out there, just somebody who's known? You know, who's out there that embodies that? And I'm having a hard time. Matthew McConaughey is who I would say. You know? He's like a rom-com guy, right? But it was after he wrote his book and Green Lights, and he's been engaging this conversation, and so he's had this celebrity life, but then he also has a private life. He has a wife and kids, and it's very clear in how he's expressing himself these days that that's his treasure. And so he's embodied those values that have somehow buffered his family, it seems, from the toxicity of Hollywood. Talk about toxicity. But yeah, I mean, that was just my question. You know, find a hero would be my advice. I think it's all in there. Find a hero, and then who are your heroes? Like, who's out there in your world that has the quality that you're like, yes, I can do that. Teach me how to do that. That's attractive to me. I'd be curious to know if you all can think of anyone in pop culture today that's really embodying this sense of courage and masculinity and strength and potential for violence.
I'm not a huge fan of Marvel movies, at least in the last few years. But Captain America, when he first started those first few movies, he was, I think, a good model for that. There was that scene in the original Captain America where, you know, he's a kind of a weak little small guy that's not really capable of much. But there was I think it was a test or something where someone threw a grenade into a room and everyone scattered, and then he dove on it. And that's when they realized, this is the guy that is going to be our super soldier. You know,
Mhm.
that willingness to sacrifice for others embodied that, or it showed the inner strength that he had, right? So I thought Captain America was really good in the Marvel films. Those were the best, at least for me. Those are my favorite ones. The Winter Soldier, second one, was like the best Marvel film made. But yeah, outside of that, it's hard to find.
Yeah,
It's
so
very, very hard to find
I love that. Outside of fiction,
outside of fiction. Got it.
who's a man in our culture that that is visible that you're like, all right, I'll follow him. Can you think of one? I mean, mass media is everywhere. There's got to be a handful of these guys out there. Where
Yeah.
are they?
There's one that I can think of. Yeah. Again, I think I've talked about him before, but when I think about, we don't align on and all our same values, but in regards to like a man, because again, when I think about what it means to be a man, and if I were to offer and answer the question that I asked previously, is if you're trying to like consolidate manly qualities, it's the bison who runs into the storm, not the rest of the herd and rest of the animals who runs away from it. Like that's what you have to embody for the rest of your life, is being prepared to go into the storm, to accept the chaos, know it's inevitable, and like dig down into the dirt and be prepared to move after it, you know? That's what it means to be man. And so I find it really inspirational. This guy, Rob Bailey, him and his wife is like she won like the first Miss Olympia competition, which is like a bodybuilding competition traditionally for men, but she won the first female one. Huge achievement. And then they created like a supplement brand and a clothing brand prior to that. And he talks about like there was nights where, you know, he had this crappy warehouse that they were working out of, and he would work until like 3 or 4 o'clock, you know, and just like would grind and grind and grind for years. And one of his things is like, you got to earn your sleep, you know, like what it takes to really dig down, accept a challenge, see things to fruition, and get after it, you know. And now he's killing it, you know. He's successful in a lot of ways. That keeps me going. You know, I look to him because I really appreciate just he's truly himself and transparent with who he is and what he believes. And he's just like, he just gets after it. He's up at 3, does whatever it takes, you know, whether it be on his farm or with the brand or whatever. That keeps me inspired to like, yeah, man, that's what it means to be a man, is like being up for everyone else, accepting the challenge, putting in the work, and doing whatever it takes. Like dig your feet into the ground and get after it.
Yeah. Harness your fire.
A couple others I'd say, you know, just the guys like Jocko, guys like Jordan Peterson. I would follow them into the fire, you know. But there's a guy talking about just kind of different but countercultural in a way that I think reflects like a lot of character and inner strength. Is an author, and he's not famous or anything. I mean, he's famous in certain circles, but Wendell Berry. He's, I think, if he's not 90 yet, he's almost 90, and he's an author and a poet, and he lives in Kentucky, and doesn't own a computer, doesn't own a telephone, doesn't own a TV set. He just works the land and he writes books, and he fights, and he fights also for the things he cares about, like for farmers and stuff. He'll go to the Kentucky, you know, courthouse and fight for farmers' rights and things because he recognized the importance of it. But that's a guy that is so countercultural but so disciplined that he hasn't surrendered to the comforts of the modern world, but has chosen willingly to live almost like he's in the 1800s, to present a type of life that can be very beautiful and very healing. You know, like what's more manly than tilling the soil, man?
Yeah.
You know, like to be able to walk out onto farmland and make it grow food to nourish you, and then to also tell stories that inspire people. For people here, Jayber Crow is on our reading list on the website, and it's by Wendell Berry, and that is, I think, the greatest modern novel. And it was written by Wendell Berry, and this is a man that I would love to just sit down and hear from him what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
To be a man means competence. I think that it embodies competence.
Yeah. Yeah. It embodies competence, skill that must be earned. Those things are earned, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Through discipline over time. And we were talking about this concept of the holy fool earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Those are men too. Talk about audacity, right?
Yeah.
Makes me think a lot about Francis of Assisi. So there was an artist in the 80s and 90s here in America in the Christian market named Rich Mullins. He's the guy that wrote Our God is an Awesome God and a bunch of other songs. And he had this really interesting and unique life. And he was kind of a tortured soul in some ways. But he was following him and his journey, because he was a total romantic for life and for Jesus, following his journey. And he had struggles too, which he was honest about, which has been so empowering for me in my story. Some of the things that he struggled with, I have struggled with. And so just to see that, him being able to be honest, especially in the market of CCM, which is where we're all human, but for some reason in like churchy or CCM, it's like people put on faces. They play an image, and some people just assume that people in like Christian music or in the Christian market or something like that are just like great, perfect people, or squeaky clean or something. It's nothing further from the truth. They're human beings. And so Rich Mullins, he was really inspired by Francis of Assisi. That's how I learned about this whole thing about like the holy fool. And that's when I first came across this idea of the Christian mystic. And, so I think I was going in a different direction there, but yeah, what does it mean? There's a good kind of fool that you can be. A fool for love, as it says in the invitation. There is a good type of fool, not folly. That's like the belligerent, naive, ignorant fool, willfully ignorant fool. But a fool, like what looks foolish to the world, right? Like Jesus at the top of his ministry when he rose from the dead, and he could have had the world. That was the temptation in the desert, wasn't it? He could have had the world. It was at that moment that he said, "Ta-ta, you guys got it from here. I'll be with you, just in a different way."
Then he goes to the underworld. It's
yeah.
the first place he goes.
Like, if you try to analyze that from our modern culture today, as far as leadership and power and what it means to make an impact, like that's insane. But it obviously isn't insane. Like there's a purpose in that, on planting trees of which you will never be shaded by, planting them for someone else. I think that's a big deal. I did think of another man out there in the culture that it's not mass media, but it's in some YouTube circles I've come across him. He's speaking of the warrior poet. His name's John Lovell, and he's a retired, I believe he's an Army, what is it? Ranger? Is he a Ranger?
Beret? I don't know.
It's not Green Beret. He's a Ranger, I believe. Yeah. And so a true warrior. I mean, he's been in combat and stuff like that. It's like special forces. He's created so he's in his retirement now, and he created this company which is really just a community called the Warrior Poet Society. I highly recommend anyone that liked this podcast, check him out. And so he has a business where he does like self-defense training and weapons, guns, tactics, kind of stuff like that. Home defense and things like that, because that's the world that he's in. And the whole time, too, he'll have other parts of his YouTube channel where he'll be reading a book and talking about this. Very similar. He could sit at this table and engage with what we're doing. He embodies, to me, what a man is in our culture. And he's a warrior poet. So he's got that. He's really working with and building a community about how to harness the strength and the audacity and the potential for violence and channel it in a way that's holy and good, dangerous and good and all that. So yeah, I'd also want to mention him too.
Going back to your question, Jake, what would you tell someone that didn't really know where to start for this, right? Could you say that question one more time?
Yeah, for those who are out there, let's say in Brent's and mine example, I don't know as much as yours, but let's say 10, 15 years ago, where you didn't know how to consolidate holding all those things at once of being a dreamer, sensitive, all of that, into being what it means to be a man. Where do you start?
Learn to fight. If I could go back to my 20-year-old self and put him in a jiu-jitsu class, I think I could have saved myself a lot of heartache. And it's not, once again, we've talked about this on here. It's not, when you're learning jiu-jitsu, like one of the lower things you're learning is how to fight. But that's part of it. And there's a confidence and there is a responsibility, I guess, that comes with knowing how to harm someone if you had to, that forces you to be thoughtful and serious. You have to be trustworthy. Like in on the mats, you're trusting someone with your neck and your limbs, and they're trusting you with theirs. You have to develop trustworthiness. You have to develop responsibility and seriousness and strength. Read great stories. Find a hero, I think, whether that be someone in pop culture, a real person, or someone in a story you love, that you can look at them and be like, okay, that's what it means to me to be heroic, courageous, valorous, and then attempt to live that out and attempt to bring order to your world.
Yeah.
I'm bad at that. Like my car right now it looks like a dump. Like the back seat is full of like coffee cups and sweaty geese and stuff, but in other ways I'm making moves to order my world around the things I find valuable. That's not something I've always been very good at. Being a dreamer, unbridled dreamer, can lead to frivolity. And there's a lot of time where I was very frivolous rather than intentional with chasing my dreams. And so to order your life in a way that avoids the frivolous nature of, or my innate desire, or not even desire, but ability to create frivolity in my life. I would learn to fight, read great stories, find a hero, and order my life. I think it comes down to adopting responsibility, choosing your suffering, or it'll be chosen for you. If you don't discipline yourself, the world will punish you. I like how you said that. Creating discipline, because within the boundaries of discipline, you actually find a lot of freedom.
Yeah. And again, going back to competence, we all have people that we probably can think of that you would want in like a survival situation because that they'll just figure it out. Like my dad built half of our house. He like managed a electrical company's like warehouse or something like that. So he can do electrical work. He was part-time welding, which is its own craft. He was also part-time working on hot rods and sheet metal and body work.
Working on hot rods, yeah.
And like fiberglass, like he just had everything, like he could do it all in my eyes growing up as a kid. And what I realized is that's mainly not just because of like working on cars, but again, it's about accepting responsibility and entering the chaos. It's about, he got to that point just because he was always down to figure it out. I think that in pursuing competence, especially with someone who's young, maybe like 17, 18, 20, whatever, your unbridled opportunity. And what you can do for yourself in pursuing competence is accepting challenges and being open to being a really good learner. You know, that you will be open to trying to figure things out along the way. Like, don't give up. And once you begin to begin to have competence, you'll begin to know what matters through context, and then you'll have the tools to actually pursue and orient yourself within the chaos.
Yeah.
Teach yourself how to unclog a toilet or fix a toilet or
Change a
tire. Change a tire. Like find ways in which you can work with your hands. That's so fulfilling. There's nothing like changing a tire.
Man hands, dude.
Man hands. You want those leathery. You've seen those photos on like social media. It's like her hands look like this, or my hands look like this, so her hands can look like this. And the man's hands are covered in oil and scars, and there's like this pretty womanly feminine hand. Like, that's just, it's
How
cheesy.
dare you? Chivalry. Sexist. Yeah, man. I'm curious to know, who was your childhood hero? Fiction or otherwise? I'm hearing dad.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously. And hopefully there's a part of our dad, if not the whole thing, hopefully a part of it. Part of him. That's heroic. Who was your childhood hero? Like, so for kids now, it's usually like a Marvel, like Spider-Man. Every kid goes through like a Spider-Man phase, it seems, and stuff like that. Are your kids doing that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, they love him. I think he's the most, it was so curious of like, why Spider-Man? Because I was the same way. Why Spider-Man? He's like the weakest of all the superheroes.
Totally.
But I think that's it. That's it though. I think it's when you're,
I was about to jump on it in the wrong way.
When you're a child,
I hate
though,
Spider-Man.
It's the most
Spider-Boy.
It's the most
relatable, maybe?
Relatable. Yeah, I think it's the most relatable. Like, I could be Spider-Man, you know? I just got to play with spiders more often.
and I think it's in part, too, that this is part of my, I have a certain aggression towards the Marvel universe. I just feel like, get out of my face. It's like this fire hose is in my face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, God, stop. Like, how many Spider-Man movies have there been?
A lot.
So many.
I think that's part of it.
Not as many, well,
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of why there's so many kids that love Spider-Man, is because Spider-Man's everywhere. They keep rebooting and
But he didn't used to be, though.
Anyway, I was about to get on a tangent about Marvel.
Yeah, that's tangential. So what were you answering originally? What was the question?
Oh,
who's your childhood hero?
Childhood heroes. That's a good question.
Man, mine is so cliche, but it's Luke Skywalker. It was Luke Skywalker. I watched Star Wars for the first time with my dad when I was 5. And I was immediately just roped into this epic drama, you know? And it's space wizards with light swords. You know, at the end of the day, it's just like, it's fantasy, you know? It's not science fiction, it's fantasy. But the story is a tale as old as time, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And this kid pulled into an adventure that's way bigger than he could have imagined. And he takes up the mantle of his mentor, faces who he could become, which is his father. And his father is this tyrant murderer. And he faces him, and he's tempted by that. And he withstands the temptation, barely. People forget in Return of the Jedi that when he's with Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader, and Emperor Palpatine tells him to kill his father or strike him down and he'll become like his father, he tries to, you know. He's almost overwhelmed by this temptation to become who he is destined to be because of his family. And then he has the strength to put down the sword. And in that, his dad is redeemed as well. Good grief. What a story, you know? Like, for me as a kid, like, you know, I didn't understand the nuance of that, but I felt the power of it, you know? And that's why I'm so pissed off at all the new Star Wars stuff right now, man. That just, like, takes a big old steaming dump on Luke Skywalker's chest. Like, sorry. But for
Space dump.
space dump. But yeah, so for me, my hero as a kid was Luke Skywalker. And as I said, like I didn't understand the nuance of that story, but I felt the power of it.
Yeah.
And it spoke to something. It spoke to something that was more than this. It spoke to this.
Yeah.
It spoke to my heart.
My childhood hero, I know I've mentioned him I think I have, surely I have, on the podcast before. Do y'all know? Have I mentioned it?
MacGyver.
Yeah, man. Richard Dean Anderson's MacGyver, the original. It was a TV show back in the late 80s, early 90s when I was a little boy. And this character, I mean, it's cheesy to look at those shows now because the production and the music, and it's totally 80s, early 90s stuff. But the character himself was my hero growing up. He was, anyone that doesn't know, I mean, MacGyver's become like a meme now because SNL did it and kind of mocked it.
MacGruber.
Yeah, because he had a mullet, which back then, which was glorious. It is glorious. It is glorious.
It's coming back around, man. So
never gets old, man.
we're redeeming it.
And so he was a character. MacGyver was this character that worked for a company called the Phoenix Foundation, and he was really into science, and he was kind of a nerd, but he also loved the outdoors, and he hated fighting, but he never shied away from a fight. So one of MacGyver's things outside of the pilot episode, so anyone that knows MacGyver, that pilot episode, he actually did have a gun, and then they quickly wrote that out. But one part of his character was he hated guns. But he found himself in a lot of situations trying to better a corner of the world where he really could have used one. Mm-hmm. And so he used his ingenuity, he used his imagination and creativity and spontaneity to break out of certain situations to be the hero. And so to me, that has been such a model for my life, is use what's around you. He'd use like a paper clip and a rubber band, and to create something. Right? See, you're thinking MacGruber.
No, yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
Everyone laughs at it, Anyway, talk about taking a dump on my hero, man.
I love it.
Thanks a lot, Saturday Night Live. But yeah, so MacGyver has been my childhood hero, so much so that one of my top 3 prized possessions to date is a signed photograph of Richard Dean Anderson. And
so cool.
Because my mom, have I talked about this on the podcast?
Mm-hmm.
I have. Okay, well, I'll skip.
I think
it
400, but not in the podcast.
Oh, really? Well, my mom. So I would not miss a show. Like MacGyver, I could not wait to go with MacGyver on the next adventure. And he was a romantic for life. He was definitely a romantic character, and he was a good character. He had an ethos. He had an ethic that he abided by. And so, for some reason, I remember because I was at that age where he was real to me. And so I don't know how this came up, but I remember somehow talking with my mom about it or something. And she looked up, she went to the library. This is pre-internet. She went to the library and looked up like a directory for like Hollywood, like listings or something with like people's agents and management and stuff like that. And she found the address to his management or his agent. And, she knew what was going on. Like she could see behind the curtain. She knew it was just a TV show, but I didn't. And so she encouraged me to write him a letter. And it happened to be when the show went off the air, which was, I think, in 1992. And I was just a kid at that time. And so I was like, where did MacGyver go? Like I was really, really heartbroken. And so she encouraged me to write a letter to him. So I wrote a letter to MacGyver. And I wish I still had that letter, but I don't remember what I said in it. But a couple of months later, I come home from school and my mom is just grinning, like ear to ear grinning. And there was this envelope on the table for me. God, I'm crying. And it was a signed picture of Richard Dean Anderson. And it's cheesy. It's like him in a blue suit with like a V-neck shirt, kind of like that cheesy photograph, But it was him. It was him. And I still have that photograph framed, and it's in my a place where I keep very special things. and I'll carry it the rest of my life. It's a very important object. Like if my house is on fire, I'm going to get my family out of there, my dogs and everything, and then and the cats too, babe. And then I'm going back for that picture. And so, yeah, to me that was one childhood hero. I actually wrote him again a couple years ago as I was getting into this psychotherapy stuff, and I looked up his management company. I wrote him again. And it was an email this time, and essentially saying, like, I owe you such gratitude for the work that you did in that character. Like, you embodied something. It's in Richard Dean Anderson. We were talking about method acting a while ago, and like he found he is MacGyver somehow for me. Maybe it's just my childhood boy in me, but I wrote him again, and I said, hey, I'm doing counseling now, and I liken what I'm doing to what MacGyver did. Is he just finds himself in these situations following his desire. He lives by an ethos, and then he uses what is in the room to create a way out. And so I wrote him. I never heard back from him, but sadly. But Richard Dean Anderson, if you're out there, man, you're my hero, or at least MacGyver in the way that you did it is my hero. But to this day,
maybe we'll get him on the podcast.
I've told,
someday.
Oh God, I would love that. I mean, that I've told Lacey that one of the greatest gifts you could ever give me is a chance to meet this guy. But he's I think he's more of a recluse now, out of the limelight. But anyway, something about that character is still to this day something I'm trying to embody, mullet included.
I love that. Love that. Well, guys,
Is it time?
I think so.
I think it's time. The light's coming up outside. The sun's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty good conversation today, guys. Who are you? What do you want? Where are you going? This has been the 0400 podcast. Keep dreaming.
Keep dreaming.
Dreaming.